was the worst coworker you ever had? I worked in a bookstore. We had a cafe and the cafe manager was my worst coworker ever. She was nice and all but so unhygienic. We had to discuss more than once to not use the dish sink in the cafe's backroom to bathe herself. She always smelled slightly sour. Well, one day while covering the cafe manager's break, an employee discovered a pair of freshly stained underwear that she had washed in the dish sink hanging off the counter in the cafe's backroom. She got fired for that one. To clarify, she was not homeless since I have given her a ride home more than once when her car was in repair. From what she told us, it was her own home. He was 17 at the time. We'll call him Jerry. We were working in a grocery store when I met him. Jerry wanted so bad to be a bodybuilder bro. He idolized The Rock. He spent countless hours in the gym every day. He woke up at 4 a.m. to run 5K, only slept for 20-minute increments throughout the day because that's what Marines do, and he made sure everyone knew about his no excuses attitude. And all he ever did was complain and make excuses. Jerry would give speeches about hard work and dedication, and whatever other BS he obviously pulled from a motivational Instagram that day. He really did put the time in at the gym though. He had the arms and chest to show it. But if you gave the kid a basic task, he was useless. Cleaning the bathrooms? He left stains and toilet paper everywhere. Stocking shelves. The products were always facing the wrong way or in the wrong spot. Offering additional assistance to customers? He never bothered, always got yelled at, and never changed. Even just consistently working was an issue for Jerry because he had to stop like every hour to eat a snack or drink a Monster. For some reason, Jerry thought I was his friend, and he would always complain to me when he got yelled at by management. He made up this conspiracy theory that management hated him and wanted to see him fail. According to him, he was never actually messing up, management was just bullying him. He would say stuff like, "They're just jealous. They don't work as hard as me and that makes them jealous." Jerry lived in a fantasy land that was a product of too many quotes he probably got from some bodybuilding calendar. Eventually, Jerry quit because he was tired of this crap, and he went to work in fast food under his older brother. Jerry got fired by his older brother. Jerry tried joining the military but apparently couldn't hack it. He tried becoming a cop but couldn't hack it. Now he's a valet at the local mega church and he recently turned 25. He'll probably get fired or quit there too. In my first job out of college, I worked in an HR department. We hired a new VP of HR, so my boss's new boss. Before day one, I scheduled a flight of hers and forwarded her all the information along with a friendly email saying that I was very excited that she was starting at our company. I told her to let me know if she needed anything. A very typical email for me to send, didn't matter your role at the company. Day one, she walks in and asks for me specifically. I stood up and smiled and went to shake her hand warmly, because who asks for the lowest on the totem pole? She refused to shake my hand and showed me an email. The email I sent her with her flight information. She asked what was wrong with it. I was alarmed and read through it again, then had to sheepishly admit I wasn't sure, but I'd love to know for next time. She said, "You come across as such a suck-up. I came to talk to you first so you could rub your face in my ass now and we could get it over with." I told her that's how I talk to everyone at the company, I see us all as a team and that's how I work. She cackled and handed me a piece of paper she had shoved in her pocket. "Here, good to know you are for real. You can get started, then." My list of tasks included getting her computer set up, which I had already done, her email up and running, which I had already done, her new passwords also done, and a few other things for comfort around her office which I could complete in about 5 minutes. I did so and returned promptly. She slapped the piece of paper out of my hand and called me a liar. I told her making sure that she was comfortable on her first day was part of my job and I accomplish many of the tasks before new employees arrive. She asked me to escort another employee into her office, so I went and got that employee and brought them down to the new VP's office. That employee was promptly fired, no reason given, and the two had never spoken before, and I was asked to escort that employee out. It was at that moment I decided to start looking for new roles. The new VP basically made me her slave for the 3 months while I looked. I was denied any vacation requests, sick leave, breaks, when my peers in my department could do whatever, whenever. I finally got an offer and went to resign with my 2 weeks' notice. I told my direct boss first, who congratulated me, and he also said he'd tell the VP for me since he was so worried about her reaction. The new VP came in screaming about how working for her was the opportunity of a lifetime. How could I pass that up? I am an idiot, that's why nobody can be trusted. Lots of other stuff went down with that woman, but I was very happy to walk out that door. Had a girl starting her PhD in the lab I worked. She was the embodiment of entitled, lazy and spoiled. She would come late, leave early, do next to no work and constantly complain she needed more money. After a while we all just hated her, mostly because while we all worked our asses off and she did next to nothing, but bosses didn't seem to care at all and just let her hang around in the lab for years. When the time came to hand in her thesis, we were all curious about what she would hand in since she basically hadn't done any work. I was convinced she would somehow weasel her way out of it like she had done all the time. I was convinced that when you can pull off being in a lab for years doing no work but no one fires you, you must be somehow a bit clever to pull that off. But nope, she failed so spectacularly as I'd never seen anyone fail before or since. So note to everyone, you can't be lazy and stupid, you can only be one of the two. I work with a rockstar employee. This means they're brilliant, but a nightmare to work with. They frequently forget to attend meetings, work hours that piss off everyone else, they're a complete hypocrite when it comes to working standards, complain about everyone else, piss off their coworkers by their constant, but mostly valid, complaining and can't follow the simple rules everyone else in the company has to follow. Unfortunately, they're absolutely amazing at their core job and we'd be screwed without them because our work is obsessed with hiring cheap overqualified people. So we suck it up and have them contribute in a different way to our already stupidly toxic environment. I sometimes wonder why I haven't left this company yet. One I hired. She was our neighbor, a young mother whose husband was a truck driver. I knew they struggled with finances, had been evicted from past apartments, that she went to their church for help with food and utilities, etc. When she told me she was laid off from her job at a bank, I hired her at the store I managed. It was the beginning of the busy season and I figured that would give her a few months to get back on her feet while she looked for something back in banking. Instead, she worked for me for less than 2 weeks. In that time, she stole from the register and another employee, was late twice, and quit by leaving her uniforms balled up in a grocery bag with a note saying she just couldn't do it anymore. That chick was an A1 scam artist and I held a grudge against her for a long time. The boss's daughter. She was a piece of work. Horribly entitled? You bet. Dunning-Kruger effect on her estimate of her own abilities. Oh yeah. Bad attitude towards everyone? Goodness yes. She made it clear that she thought everyone who worked there was lazy, stupid and taking advantage of her father. Also, she was thoroughly convinced that she should be running the business because she would do better than anyone else. Including her own father. She had an uncanny talent for sniffing out problems, areas where things weren't being done right. At one point, when asked to provide a professional reference for her, I mentioned this in a positive light. The problem was that her idea of a solution to the problems she found was, do it right or do it better. The idea that she should help solve the problems she uncovered seemed utterly alien to her. She worked for her dad's business because no one else would hire her. She kept that job because her dad would never fire her. When her father hired her older brother and was openly grooming him to take over the business, then she finally left, after securing a generous severance package. I quit a while after that, but last I heard, she was back working at the family business again. He stole from people, would let himself in uninvited homes, groom and prey on teens 13 to 17, harassed a girl for years and pulled a knife out on her when she rejected him, and more. He didn't get the boot until years later because he was such a good worker. The guy is in his mid to late 30s and still does this, working not far from a middle school. And his former workplace, when any of the above happened, the higher-ups would say, "He never acted like that around me," and would ignore the situation. She was actually a very nice person, but she made my job so much more difficult. When I was a new graduate vet at my first job, another new vet was working there as well. Now, I have some self-esteem and confidence issues myself, but she was something else. For months, she'd come to find me for nearly literally every other consult to get me to examine her animal to make sure she didn't miss anything, or talk to her clients because she wasn't able to say things like, "No, this doesn't need antibiotics," to them. I was effectively doing two jobs half the time. It got even worse when one senior vet got sick and the other quit, so it was literally just me and her at what was supposed to be a 4-vet practice for 6 weeks. My manager. After a break, a girl didn't come back and I asked why, and my manager said it was because her grandfather passed away. And then said she could have at least finished her shift. Someone who, by now, would go as an entitled Karen. I was still a teenager back then and it was just a side job for me. I was a sales assistant in a bakery. Or, to be exact, in one store of a bakery chain. I had been there for almost a year, worked 2 to 3 times every week and usually worked alone, closing the store. I knew what I was doing. So did the apprentices who were my age. They hired a part-time worker. We were the age of her children and she treated us as if she had the right to give us orders. Didn't ask if we would clean the glasses but ordered us to. Didn't do things herself. Knew everything better. "No, you can't take that cloth for window cleaning, take the other." We always take the other one. The most horrible one was when I was with a customer and sold them a very big bread, bigger than our paper bags. I put it into 2 bags. Not in the plastic bag, as bread really does not belong in plastic bags. In front of the customer, she told me multiple times how what I was doing was wrong and I needed to do it differently and how dumb and wrong it was. I finished the sale and took her back and I, a 17-year-old, scolded her massively never to do that in front of customers again and that she had no idea what she was talking about. Why was I so sure? A month before I had been to a workshop on product sales, professional attire, behavior, and promotions, which covered exactly this behavior. The apprentices made her quit after a few months. I used to work as an operations supervisor for a security company. I had a coworker that was used for backup, let's call him James. We lost one of our regulars and had to use James. James would complain about the work all the time and he wasn't very good at his job. I was working the night shifts, one rotation, and he was covering the afternoons. We were working 12 hours back to back. I was working from midnight to noon and James was working from noon to midnight. On Saturday he relieved me at noon as normal and I went home to sleep. I woke up around 8 p.m. and went for a run. I got a series of text messages but I didn't check my phone until I finished my run. When I finished I got texts from James. He told me that I needed to cover his shift the next day because he was too stressed out and needed time away from the office. Essentially he was asking me to cover my shift later that night, midnight to noon, cover his shift, noon to midnight, and then cover my normal shift, midnight to noon. He asked me to work a 36-hour shift because he was stressed out. I told him no and called him crazy. The moment I said this he agreed to come in as normal. Now fellow Redditors, you might be asking why he needed to ask me this. The reason why he asked me to cover his shift was that there was a girl he liked but she started dating someone else. I worked as a barista for a while, and I had this one customer who came in a few times a week. He was awkward, not in a cute way, but I didn't think much of it. He'd try to start a conversation and I'd be polite, but I wouldn't necessarily encourage him. He mentioned where he lived, and I noted that my chain had a coffee shop in his town, but he drove a couple of towns over to mine, which I thought was odd. One day I'm at work and he orders a coffee, and as I'm making it, he starts talking about how cool and pretty I am and asks if we could go out sometime. I was pretty annoyed and I politely declined, saying I had a boyfriend, which I did at the time, and he said, "He's lucky, I wish I had a girl like you." Which creeped me out. That was on a Friday. I come in for my shift on Monday and he's behind the counter in a uniform. Excitedly tells me he got a job here. I didn't really know what to do. Not only did he continue to hit on me and constantly try to get my social media from me, but he was also absolutely incompetent, and a health hazard. He came in with a disgusting rash on his arm once and he would scratch it and then handle people's food. I told the manager if she didn't fire him I'd quit. I was the longest working employee there by far, so I figured she'd fire him, but she didn't, so I left. In a building with 3 floors, he'd use alternate men's rooms each day, never flushing the toilet when he was done. The guy thought it was hilarious to leave it there for all to see, including coworkers on other floors. Even when he was called out on it, the guy persisted, leaving his number 2 in plain view and somehow feeling cocky about it. I worked in an office with a literal cat lady. She had at least a dozen cats and didn't have enough money to care for them. She looked like a cadaver. She was very skinny, her skin was waxen, her hair oily and limp, and she stank. I won't even talk about her teeth. For some reason, she thought I was her best friend, even though I'd never socialized with her outside of our office and never sought her out inside of the office. I was just there to do my job and go home. But I was the one she came to in order to complain and moan about how everyone was against her. She also thought that the vet should treat her cats for free because reasons. I don't know. I worked there for about 7 months. It was a temp job, and every day I heard more about her cats than I ever wanted to hear. She also had no concept of personal space, so I got to smell them too, whether I wanted to or not. And whenever she wasn't parking herself in my cubicle, someone else would take her place and give me an earful about her. Man, I hate office politics. I used to work in a restaurant and had a male coworker grab my penis against my wishes at work. I wish I turned him in, but I've never been good with confrontation. My manager kept telling me I'm doing well and then fired me due to incompetence. Like what? Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you liked the video. Comment down below who your worst coworker was.